But first it will piss you off. Gloria Steinem reminds us that we crave the truth, but in fact it's a tough pill to swallow. In that spirit of truth-telling, let's remind ourselves that we are on native land, land of the Serrano and Kauai, and we remember that American wealth was built on the backs of enslaved black and brown folks. I know what you're thinking. Oh man, Zach, I just want to enjoy my graduation, and here we're talking about the Black Holocaust and the Native Holocaust. But see, that's the complexity of being a socially aware college graduate. This is what they mean when they say the examined life. Malcolm X responded to Socrates across time and said, yes, the unexamined life is not worth living, but the examined life is actually quite painful. Today we celebrate the pain and the hope that is life. We celebrate the sacrifices that you and your family have made. We celebrate those that have passed away along the journey, and we celebrate those that have yet to come into your lives. As we rejoice today, let's dream about what kind of society that you all want to create today, and tomorrow, and the day after that. JFK promised Camelot. LBJ promised a great society. MLK conjured up a biblical promised land. And Ocasio-Cortez championed a Green New Deal to combat climate change. I think you are going to create an amazing society and a land of milk and honey. Of course, there's going to be a vegan option and a gluten-free option. I know. A society where racism and transphobic laws are struck down, where radical love reigns supreme. Many of you have challenged the gender binary myth, the myth of meritocracy, created a Race on Campus academic festival. Shout out to Race on Campus. Called out the patriarchy and reaffirmed that Black lives, brown Muslim refugees, working class disabled women's and trans lives matter in a country where they have historically not. Like one of the founding members of Black Lives Matter, Alicia Garza, explained, you have embarked on various rehumanization projects that have the power to teach us how to love ourselves again, how to transform society with an intoxicating love. I'm excited for your generation, but I'll be honest, I'm also worried. Because you're so brilliant and you're going to be wildly successful. Sometimes success brings money, not always. I'm a good example of that. And money oftentimes brings a dangerous conformity and silence to the psychological, spiritual, and economic violence of systemic oppression. Audre Lorde teaches us that we cannot destroy the master's house without the master's, with the master's tools. Lorde is right, but the masters are still running many houses of government, of colleges, of corporations, of law offices. And the masters face skin color, gender identity, and religion changes over time. Some of you can easily become one of those masters. This is the scary thing. We are never taught about how to act when we get power. How to not bully each other, even if we were oppressed ourselves. How to not use social justice language to police and denigrate each other. Frantz Fanon's black skin, white masks. Colonized minds become colonizer hearts. Money talks, and so does power. For example, there were a bunch of wealthy Germans who supported Hitler, not because they hated Romanis, socialists, or Slavs, but because they loved themselves and money more than anything else. I'm not saying wealthy folks are bad, don't get me wrong. Some are great, and they give back to society, like Jay-Z, Beyonce, Jennifer Lopez, Nipsey, and Cardi B. But when you get there, don't forget to share. I'm just worried that you might forget what you wanted society to look like when you were 18, 19, and 20. Before you had all the student debt, the mortgages, the family obligations, more at stake, more to lose. Some of you might even be living in the Beverly Hills of the world one day. You're gonna be driving fancy cars and loving fancy people and sending your kids to fancy schools. It's easy to challenge the system now, but harder when your boss doesn't want you saying those things, when your desire to change society clashes with the company's ability to make money. I've lost a job or two because my coworkers and I stuck to what we thought was right. Justice doesn't always pay, but it makes you whole. Justice is not easy, but as a famous Pulitzer Prize winner, Kendrick Lamar, once said, it's inside my DNA and it's inside yours too. They call it epigenetics, where the PTSD and trauma of the last generation is passed down to the next one. Speaking of DNA, I asked my dad what I should say today, and he said, I don't know. I boycotted my graduation because I disagreed with the UC's complicity with the Vietnam War draft. Stories of challenging power is what I grew up with and what I share with you today. My dad is a refugee, born in a displaced persons camp in Germany, born to Catholic nuns because his mother didn't trust the ex-Nazi doctors to deliver her child. My grandmother, who survived Auschwitz, taught me about the dead people being eaten by rats in Buchenwald, but she also taught me about the black folks being eaten by dogs in Birmingham. Dr. West teaches us there is a connectivity between black, brown, and Ashkenazi Jewish folks, a fear of cultural death. And for good reason, it's in our DNA. Hearing stories of family members whose lives were incinerated in the ovens of Auschwitz made me realize we are all taught history incorrectly. Therefore, we're doomed to repeat it. James Baldwin put it best. Many Anglo-Americans and white folks are trapped in a history they don't understand, and until they understand it, they cannot be released from it. Europeans and Japanese didn't create camps and kill a bunch of people just because they hated them. They did so because there was money to be made. Big corporations benefited from a system based on slave labor and human death. In fact, Hitler learned from our own racism. He copied our Jim Crow laws to create the Nuremberg laws. And he copied our Native American reservations system to create the concentration camps. From Buchenwald to Birmingham, this human disease of greed, power, and fear produces the same virus of hate and death. But Johnston graduates are going to be different. I know it. As you move through society, be mindful of what your 18-year-old self would have said and would have wanted. My 18-year-old self saw that my grandmother got $300 a month in reparations from the German government. But I always wondered why the richest country in the world didn't pay reparations to Native and black folks. But this is the critical lens that we developed in Johnston. The examined life that should not be used to bully each other and but one that should push us towards coalition building, toward becoming the Solanges of the world, the Marsha P. Johnsons of the world, Dolores Huertas and Francis Kochiyamas of the world. A critical love that opens our eyes to the world that could be. KRS-One, Knowledge Reigns Supreme, teaches us that we get the word hip in hip hop from the Senegalese Wolof word hippie cat, which means to open one's eyes, to be awake, to be woke. Johnston students have awakened one another by challenging anti-black and brown practices in this very college, by trying to get more folks of color in positions of power and starting groups like Race-Based, White Fragility Reading Clubs, and calling in and out community members to become more racially literate. So how do we create that society that is not only anti-racist, but pro-liberation, that doesn't only declare war on poverty, but declares peace on the poor? We have enough wealth in the world for everyone to eat, dream, and dance across the cosmic winds of time, but we let fear stop us from believing in ourselves and each other. Author Ronald Wright teaches us that we have such a twisted culture around success and money that the poor in the US don't even think of themselves as poor, instead as temporary, embarrassed, soon-to-be millionaires. We all want to be rich in the pocket, but we forget to be rich in the heart, mind, and soul. We are afraid of what we are capable of together, but fear and greed has given us the world that we know today. Everyone in the audience, Johnston grad or not, will create a new, better world. I'm sure of it. In closing, I want to share the words of Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel with you. These words will help you in the coming months when the grad parties are over, when summer sets in, and you start questioning what life is all about. Just remember there is meaning beyond absurdity, that every deed counts, every word is powerful, that your life is a work of art, that each day you add a new brushstroke to. Your life is a masterpiece in its infancy. Paint happy trees, be righteous, shake up the world, love wildly, learn feverishly, give generously, and paint like your life depended on it. like all our lives depended on it. Because they do. Let's start painting, Johnston. Thank you.